The Monkey King is Netflix's newest animated movie. This movie follows the Monkey King, a mystical monkey who is born out of a rock on top of a mountain and isn't accepted by people, even his own kind, other monkeys, and decides to go on a quest to become an immortal god so he could potentially be accepted by people. That's a very basic premise of this movie. Monkey, again, is the main character. He's this mysterious, mystical monkey who's just kind of born out of a rock one day, and no one likes him. Everyone just dislikes him. He's disruptive. Before him, everyone just followed the rules of the universe, and they felt like there was balance, and he kind of brings this chaos into it that no one really likes, and kind of hates him for it. This is a well animated movie. I like the character designs and everything. The animation is fluid. It's very fun at times. Unfortunately, the animation is the best thing coming from this movie. The characters aren't very likable. There's one character that I kind of like, but she doesn't have, a lot to do in this movie, or she's in it a lot, but she doesn't really grow or anything, and I feel like she doesn't really get a lot of time to shine. The main character, Monkey, is very unlikable. You'd think by the end of the movie she would be, or he would become likable, but he's just not likable. He starts off, kind of misunderstood, but then as he gets older, he kind of becomes a jerk, and he stays a jerk for the entirety of the movie. The main villain of the movie also isn't very interesting. He's kind of a joke. Even at the final big battle, he's still kind of a joke, not threatening at all. The story is kind of not well paced. Like the first 15 minutes, or just take up a lot of time to introduce the monkey and his story. It's kind of wonky. In the rest of the movie, it's kind of wonky. It's just kind of him just going like, oh, I'm going to go here next, or I want to do this next kind of thing. And then they just go to that area and do it and then kind of move on to the next area. It doesn't flow very well. It's not often very interesting. There's not a lot of high stakes. So those are a lot of things that are important things that go against this movie, unfortunately. The music also isn't very good. A lot of the music is good, but it's not very good in like the big action pieces. I always felt when they came on, I was like, oh, this would be a lot better if they had like a good, crazy, catchy tune. Often it's okay at best, unfortunately. It's kind of an average movie. I don't think it's horrible. It's not bad. It's not badly animated. It's not like the story is just very, very horrible. It's just okay, but okay just doesn't really cut it these days. Overall, I would give this movie a 5 out of 10. Like I said, it's a fine movie, not too egregious. I think people can go into this and really enjoy it, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who go into it and just kind of love it. Unfortunately, it just, not me. It wasn't for me. Just like I said, it's a 5 out of 10, an average, maybe below average movie. Nothing too fantastic. So I'm going to take spoilers and say what happens in the movie. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you hear I'm talking spoilers, move on if you don't want to hear spoilers. Again, so the movie starts with the monkey being born out of the rock, and he starts causing chaos, and the gods, the immortal ones, see him and they want to kill him right away. The Jade Emperor wants to kill him right away. But Buddha says, no, let him live his life and find his own way. So the gods don't mess with him or decide to just kind of leave him be. So he runs around and he finds this group of monkeys, and he's like, I'm a monkey, you're monkeys. We should be family or whatever. He doesn't speak at this point, but it's kind of implied. And he accidentally gets one of these monkeys eaten by a demon who's living in this waterfall. So he decides to train to fight this demon. It's like a giant lion or tiger person. So he decides to train by throwing coconuts at rocks and everything for it seems like several years, because he's a little baby who can't talk, and by the time he thinks he's well trained, he's an adult and he's able to talk. So after he trains, he sees the lion or tiger going back to the monkeys to try to steal another one to eat it. So he goes to attack this tiger, completely fails. Like these coconuts do nothing to him. The tiger's just blocking him and everything, and it's pretty much pointless. So the monkeys are like, "You failed. You can't do anything. There's no way you can defeat this tiger on your own." And they're like, "The only way you'd be able to do it is if you had a weapon." And then he's like, "Where am I gonna get a weapon?" And they're like, "Oh, well, you can get one from the Dragon King." So he jumps into the ocean and swims to the Dragon King, who's about to use this magical staff to create a giant storm to take over the world or make it super rain and watery for the water fish people. But Monkey comes in and he talks to the magical stick, and it's like, "Oh, I'm looking for the ultimate warrior." And he's like, "It's funny because I'm looking for the ultimate weapon." So the stick decides to join him. It's at the start, it's like a big pillar, and it shrinks down, and he takes it, and he goes confront the demon. He fights the demon. He beats it with the help of the stick because he doesn't have any skills, but the stick helps him. So he defeats the demon, and everyone's like, "Yay, Monkey King, Monkey King!" So that's where he gets his name. But the elder monkey, who really hates him, is like, "Look, you're never going to be loved or accepted by anyone because of your recklessness and the way how that you don't really care about people. It's like, in that weapon of yours, it belongs in the hand of a god, an immortal one, not you." So he gets it in his head. He's like, "Oh, the only way I'm going to get accepted is if I become one of the gods or immortal ones." So he's like, "How would that be possible?" He's like, and the elders like, "The only way they would ever pay attention to you is if you defeat 100 demons." So he's like, "Okay, I'm going to go defeat 100 demons." So he goes off, and there's like this quick montage. It's pretty cool. The song isn't very good in it, but it's very cool of him defeating a bunch of different demons. Like I said, very cool stuff. And then, like, we flash forward, I don't know how many years, but it's a good chunk of time again, and he's defeated 99 demons, and he shows up to this small town to find his final 100th demon. So he goes to the town people. He's like, "I'm looking for a demon to defeat. After I defeat this demon, I'm going to become a god, so you're going to have to do a coronation ceremony for me." He's like a very jerk, just kind of demanding stuff for him to defeat this demon for them. And this little girl shows up, and she's like, "Oh, I want to be your assistant." And he's like, "No, I don't do assistants. I don't like you." Anyway, this fire demon starts coming through the city, and he decides to fight him, or her, and he starts fighting her. They're fighting up in the sky and everything. He's deflecting her and all her fire attacks, and actually doing a good job defeating her. Well, I would say that, but a lot of the fire he's deflecting and is just falling back into the town. So the battle ends. He defeats this fire demon, but the town pretty much gets destroyed because I don't know, he just sucks. He's a jerk. So they do a ceremony, but the gods don't show up. The Dragon King does show up to try to steal the stick again, but he fails. But during the ceremony, he's just like, "Well, they're never going to accept you because you're not immortal like them." So he gets it in his head that he needs to become immortal. So after they, get rid of the Dragon King, he decides to let this little girl Lynn join him to become his assistant because she can read. And he goes on a quest to become immortal. So they go to hell to find his scroll with his name. He's like, "If I, cross out my name on my scroll, I'll become immortal." So they go down to hell to find his scroll, and hijinks ensue. They fight King Yama or whatever his name is, and they find the Monkey King scroll and Lynn's scroll, and she reads her scroll and she gets very sad. And then they get his scroll and he crosses off his name. He's like, "Yes, I'm immortal." So they leave the area and he's like, "Okay, gods," or he calls up the gods. He's like, "Okay, gods, I'm immortal. Like, I'm gonna show up." And they're like, "Well, you're only half immortal." They're like, "You crossed off your name, and that means you're never gonna age and turn old and die, but you can still die in battle." So he's like, "Okay, well, I have to figure out how to become immortal." And while they were in hell, they get this book that explains how you can become completely immortal. So it says that they need to find this magical peach. If he eats it, he'll become immortal. But this is when we find out that Lynn is working for the Dragon King to help him get the stick back, which they just call it stick in this entire movie, which I hate. Even in freaking Dragon Ball, they call it a power pole, which is a better name. I don't know if they actually name it in the book, but or the Journey to the West book, but I kind of hate that they just call it Stick. Anyway, she's working for the Dragon King, so she sets up the Monkey King to go to this area with some poison drug peaches that if he eats, he'll be knocked out so they can steal his stuff. After some hijinks ensue, he eats one of the peaches, so is the Dragon King and his minions, so they can't really steal the staff. And she almost steals the staff, but she fails. So they're like, well, the peaches didn't work. And he's like, what do we do now? And she reads the back of the book. She's like, oh, well, in heaven, there's this lady you can make an immortal elixir. So they decide to go to heaven. In heaven, they mix the potion while fighting this god immortal person lady. The Monkey King's fighting her, and during the scuffle, he almost gets captured. But Lin, who finally gets the staff and is actually leaving, decides to come back to save him. She saves him, and then she feeds him the immortal potion, so he becomes 100% immortal. He's like, well, I'm 100% immortal, no one can stop me now. And he starts going on a rampage, and Lin's trying to calm him down, but he just won't calm down. So she eats this potion or whatever that makes her teleport back to Earth, and she's just falling towards Earth. And the Monkey King decides to save her, and they kind of have a heart-to-heart little connection moment, which is kind of like one of the only ones in the movie, and it's okay, but it doesn't really work that well. But then she tricks him, or she kind of talks to him. She's like, well, my village kind of needs help, and he's like, well, no one's going to help your village. It's like, if you really want something, you need to take it for yourself. So she tricks him. She's like, well, I bet you can't hold your breath under water for a very long time. So he's like, I'm immortal. I bet I can hold my breath for like 3 years. So he jumps in the water that they're next to, and she calls the Dragon King, and she gives him the staff. And then the Monkey King eventually comes out of the water, and she's like, I'm sorry, I gave the Dragon King your staff. My village is in a drought, and he promised me if I gave him the staff, that he would cause a storm to give us water and everything. And the Monkey King gets angry, and he's just like, forget you, I should have never trusted you, you're a bad person, blah, blah, blah. So he takes out to try to get his stick back from the Dragon King, who puts it in this machine that makes it big again. It causes a storm, which causes him to become gigantic. And then the Monkey King shows up, and they start having this big old battle. But the Monkey King is failing until Lin shows up, and she decides to help him. And she tricks the Dragon King to use electricity, which makes the Monkey King grow big for whatever reason. So he grows big, and he gets his stick back, and he defeats the Dragon King. But then he goes on a rampage, so the gods show up, because Buddha's just like, okay, do your thing, whatever. So they show up, and they try to defeat him, but he's too powerful, and he defeats the gods. But Buddha eventually shows up himself, and he, puts Lin inside of him, and Lin tricks him again. She's like, if you can jump out of my palm, you'll become the leader of all the gods. If you can't, you're going to be punished on Earth. So he's like, that's easy. So he jumps, and it looks like he's traveling through the galaxy and everything, and he gets to a point where he marks it, and then he comes back to Buddha's hand, and Buddha's just like, well, you never left my palm. He's like, what are you talking about? I traveled all the way across the galaxy. And then it shows Buddha's palm, and he just got to almost the tip of his finger, apparently, because Buddha is I believe he's the galaxy. I don't know, I don't understand it very well. So he fails, and the movie kind of ends with him being trapped in this stone prison. And Lin and him kind of have a heart-to-heart, oh, I really care about you, and I care about you too, even though they don't. It's kind of a forced, we like each other. But Lin has a happily ever after, and the Monkey King gets trapped, and that's where it ends. Like I said, this movie doesn't really work. It's kind of like a prequel to the book Journey to the West. It sets up where the Monkey King is in this movie. And unfortunately, because of that, I think they just kind of made up this story. He's a jerk. He doesn't grow as a character, so you don't really like him throughout it. There's times where I wanted to like him, but I couldn't care for him because he didn't care about anyone. And even when he got what he wanted, he wanted more and more, and he went in a rampage. And there's times when you feel like he's going to learn that lesson. He's going to learn to care about Lin. But it never happens. Like I said, there's this forced ending where they kind of like each other. But I'm like, Lin shouldn't like him. He was a jerk to her the entire time. The only nice thing he ever did for her is save her from dying. But even then, like, he just decided to do it out of nowhere. I felt like he wouldn't have done that in that point of the story, but it's very forced. Like I said, it's based off the novel, so it's like in this weird place where, like, I think all his character growth might happen in the book. I've never read it, so I'm not sure. So this movie goes from beginning to end with him not really growing as a character. He just becomes, you know, a mystical monkey to an immortal god monkey by the end of the movie, but it's not really growth. Like I said, by the end of it, you're not really rooting for him or feel sad that he's trapped. And there's moments where they try to make you feel the emotional core of him, like he's this sad monkey who no one cares about him and he's sad and alone, but it doesn't really go anywhere, or that emotional core just does not connect, which doesn't work. You know, by the end you're just like, whatever, he's trapped, who cares? So I don't know if they're going to try to make a sequel and maybe he'll grow then, but by the end of the movie, like I said, I just didn't care for him. Not likable character, and the story was just like going from point A to point B so he can become immortal. Not too interesting. Overall, like I said, it's a very average movie. I wish it was a little better, and I hope it does get a sequel. I would love to see them adapt the Journey to the West story. I think that could be interesting. Listen, I'm not too familiar with it. The only stuff I know about is from watching other media. So it'd be very cool to get a really good adaptation, animated adaptation that I could watch and be like, okay, so I can see the Monkey King grow. Because like I said, I did kind of want to like him, but it didn't happen in this movie. So overall, average movie, unfortunately. I think I would recommend it for people who like the character, but I don't think I would recommend it to anyone who's looking for a really good animated movie that they might enjoy. So not horrible. Some people will like it, some people won't. Okay, if you like this movie, let me know in the comments below. You know, if you think the book is better, if there's an actual prequel in the book that explains the story better, let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.